Brilliant. We're live. Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. It's great to have you here. We'll just give it a minute or so before we get started. Just wait while we're waiting for people to jump in. Brilliant. Cool. Welcome to the webinar. I'm Daniel O'Donoghue. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of CONQA, Construction Field Management Software. I have a background in engineering, and at CONQA, we love making the days and lives of those who work on projects a little bit easier and the projects to run a bit smoother. I'm going to do a bit of technical hygiene up front. Just to confirm, can everyone hear me? If you can just pop a yes in the chat box, that would be awesome. So we can test that that's all working. Thank you very much. Love it. Our session today is going to be 45 minutes long. There'll be a presentation from Ajith, followed by a Q&A. We'll be recording the session and you'll receive a copy of the recording later this week. Your mics have been muted just to limit any interruptions throughout the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box. Our team member, Elise, who's kindly coordinating the webinar, is sitting there in the background for any technical issues that you may have. So do reach out to her if you need any help. Otherwise, let's get into it. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on how Fulton Hogan transformed their QA by digitizing ITPs and capturing real-time data on site. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Ajith Kulappurath, the Regional Quality Manager of the Southern Region at Fulton Hogan. Ajith brings 30 years of experience developing and implementing quality management systems on both national and international level projects. He has worked on major civil infrastructure projects in road and transport infrastructure, rail, remediation, level crossing removals, ports, pipelines, airports, and structures. He is passionate about exceeding industry standards and being part of the transformation that we're seeing in the quality space. Today, Ajith will be discussing his team's digital ITP and lot management journey on the Craigieburn Road upgrade project. Ajith, thank you very much for being here today. Like everyone here on the call, I'm looking forward to hearing from you, so I'll hand it over to you to take it from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you for the introduction. We'll kick off, and I think it's important that we always start with what the background is and where we started, and that's pretty important. So we have been using CONQA for quite some time now, but what we were doing was we had CONQA, but we were also using a standalone Excel register, and that's what we use for managing all the lot information. So typically the way we manage Excel sheets, it is lookups, and we had to get data from different sources and then actually manage it in such a way that we get the information that we need to present to the external parties and to within the internal stakeholders. Some of the issues that we faced initially was related to data validation and on the attributes. I think we'll talk a bit more about that as we go to the next slides. We had to update registers every other day because we were maintaining an Excel sheet and we had to get data from different sources. So obviously, when you have that sort of information coming from different places, collecting it and then putting it into one Excel sheet, there's always an opportunity for mismatch between the requirements. And therefore, that actually impacts how we actually report it internally or to MRPV. So MRPV is the client. MRPV stands for Major Roads Project Victoria. They're the organization or the government body that actually provides all the contracts to contractors like us, where we actually build roads, bridges, and all the other infrastructure. So we actually report to MRPV, and for that, we need to have data on a regular basis, and we use actually the CONQA's output for actually providing that information. But again, what we wanted was we wanted clean data to come out, and then we found that we were not able to get a lot of information from CONQA, and that actually resulted in us actually creating an Excel sheet. But then again, what happened was the project is a huge project, and we started getting information from 10 different sources, and that required a lot of effort to actually manage information, especially when it comes to the month-end reporting. There was a lot of issues that we had to go through. So that's when the breaking point was, when we realized that we are actually spending too much time and resources, obviously. And we said, no, we need to think about it and make it more in a more effective manner. And that's when we reached out to CONQA. And we said, let's actually look at something that we can actually make life easy for all of us. So when we started the process, the considerations that we had was, obviously it has to be user-friendly, because engineers are too busy doing so much of activities on the field. They would have a lot of time to work on site, but they also need to make sure that they actually provide all the conformance documentation. So it's got to be pretty user-friendly so that it makes it easy for them to actually complete their conformance records. And it's important that there's a good level of engagement when they actually do these recordings, in the sense getting all the conformance data and making sure that it actually serves the purpose. Real-time data, that's always important, because when we look at data, we need to make sure that they are valid and they are correct. So very, very important that we had real-time data at all the time. We don't have to go chasing people. So we need to make sure that at any point in time, when we look at the data source or the information or the analytics that we have, they're all correct and they actually show the right information. This obviously will lead to having a proper dashboard or dashboard functionality, which provides an overview of all of that, which will make it easy for us to actually, we don't have to go into an Excel sheet and provide different charts in there. So if you can have everything in one place, which is the CONQA dashboard, I'm sure that actually will provide us a lot of benefit. So we thought about all of that, and obviously from a system improvement perspective, we wanted the system to be very agile and flexible, because there's no limits in terms of actually improving the system. So it's got to be scalable. We need to make sure that in the future we can add all the other functionalities, but the considerations were more related to making it user-friendly and getting data on a daily basis, and correct data. That's more important. So let's move on to the other slide. So in terms of success measures and what sort of change that we looked at. So initially, before the change, the engineers were managing all their lots via Excel, as I said before. But after the change, what happened was engineers started managing the lots within the system, and that was again real time. So you don't actually go into different systems. You have just CONQA. You actually manage everything from there. And a result of that was the quality of the data that actually improved tremendously. And then data cleansing was no longer required, and that saves us a lot of time, obviously. And then updating of Excel register is still required by the client because they're using a different system. So we had to provide them an Excel register to them, but it was just a click of a button for us. We had all the information ready to go from CONQA directly, which is actually, I think, pretty good for us. It takes us less than 15 minutes to compile everything, whereas previously it was taking us hours because we had to clean up data and make sure that we had all the missing information. That includes even actually following up with people, because they could have put data somewhere else, and we had to actually capture that. Overall, improved compliance. So I think that's the most important part of quality management. We need to make sure we have compliance, and system is now reinforcing those requirements, because what we did was when we built in a different attributes, we made sure that they were mandatory. So before a verification could be completed, so people had to actually fill in data, and without that, they can't move forward. So that actually provides us with a very, very well good compliance system. Obviously, with any new system, the biggest challenge is always the change management. And I think we managed that pretty well. And the reason for that was we worked with CONQA seamlessly and over a period of several months. So basically, we provided a lot of input to the rollout from a lot management perspective. And what we did was we mapped all the attributes values, and then we replaced it where possible with free text fields, with where we could actually go with drop downs. We went with drop downs. So the intent was, as I said in the first slide, it's got to be user friendly. That was the whole intent. So if you wanted to make it user friendly, make people use it effortlessly, then minimum data input, and that's where we had buttons where they had to just press the pass button or the fail button, or maybe sometimes it's a yes or a no. In some cases where we could actually have drop downs, we had that. So free text only where really we need to have information that cannot be actually provided in the beginning. So that actually helps. And again, we wanted to minimize disruptions, because with any new system, that's something that we can't avoid. So we made sure that there was no disruptions. And I think all this was, again, managed seamlessly with CONQA. We had existing data and we had new data that's coming in parallel. So we had features and we had a system where we went through testing and acceptance parallelly, but we went over only when it's required. On specific instances, we had to cut over to the old system. But other than that, all the system updates happened seamlessly, and most importantly, it happened during out of business hours. So that actually avoids disruption, because we don't want people complaining when they're actually working in the field and they suddenly see that documentation or the data that they put in has actually changed. And as I said, again, the most important thing is we need to bring everyone in this journey and make sure that they're comfortable with what they're doing. So we didn't want disruptions, because as soon as you have disruptions, people have a negative thought about the system. So we managed that pretty well, and I think CONQA has really worked with us in that space to make it seamless. We also had a couple of challenges in terms of getting engineers to use the new functionality. Basically, there was a small change in terms of the way we actually had a lot management terminologies that we brought in. So earlier it used to be just adding a checklist. So we wanted to change that and make it add a lot, because that makes more sense. And I think people understand that better. So we were able to do that pretty seamlessly. We also overcome a lot of these challenges again by training. And when I say training, it is internal in-person training on each of those features. And sometimes we also went up to their desks and we had a chat with them and made sure that they actually understood the features. And sometimes we ask questions to them, and how do you do this, and how do you think this is going to work out for you? And I think that actually worked well, because that also shows their understanding. And most importantly, I think we also introduced something like a tag or a new tip or a badge with the system. So basically, it actually comes up, and then you pretty much know that this is a new addition to the system. So that actually helps a lot, basically, when we are transitioning to a new system. So we added a new badge to the add lot, for example. Not just to add lot, we did it for several other things, but as an example, add lot is the most important aspect of the change that we had. So we did that, and as I said, it was more temporary, so now it's been removed. but that actually helped for people to understand what they need to actually focus on, and not actually do something that can go wrong, or rather would be actually a rework. So populating new fields again. The most important aspect that we considered when we did this was when we moved from an old system to the new system. Obviously, as I said before, we had a lot of new attributes. So the challenge was to actually populate all of them. And what we did was we did the bulk change that could be done by using a simple Excel sheet. We could actually go and upload all the new attributes into the system. And that really helped a lot, because there was so much of, I would say, more than a year's work had already been completed when we jumped into the new system. So there was attributes that were not there before, and we had to actually update that. So we got all that done very seamlessly. Again, it's because of the functionalities that we considered and introduced when we went into the new system. I think the most important aspect here is, again, capturing real-time data. Now, the new user interface guides, guides users to entering all the required information. So basically, the progress can be seen at all time, and you can see the statuses, and I think that's pretty important. Engineers also now use the online system for reporting a lot status in team meetings, and that's pretty important, because when we talk about data and we talk about where we are from a progress perspective, it's important that we all have the same understanding, the same information, so it's easy for everyone to interpret what's in CONQA and actually present it to the team. So that actually helps when we have an online system. No longer accessing a static or offline, potentially out of date Excel spreadsheet. That's a huge change, because we always had issues where people were referring to different information, and then we're trying to actually understand what is the actual correct information. We also use this information to present to the client in their meetings, which actually, again, helped us a lot, because we were pretty clear, we were sure as to what was actually being presented as the right information. And then even the client or even our engineers could actually see the status of the lots at any point in time. The most important is that when we set up certain objectives and targets, more in terms of achieving closure of lots within 60 days after physical work is complete. So we had that as an objective. So this actually really helped us to monitor that, because it gives you the age from which the lot is actually moved from different stages. And that's important for us, because it's an objective not only internally, but even for the client, that once you physically complete the work, we need to close the lot within 60 days. And I think that can actually now be seen on the dashboard by anyone and everyone. That makes a huge difference for us to keep up with the objectives of the client and the internal objective. So obviously, that gives us a picture of whether we're doing well or whether we are doing not well. Now, the impact from a stakeholder perspective, again, going back to what we said again, MRPV, our client, pretty happy to see that they're able to see real-time data, and it's available at all times. So that was really useful. And I think they also have that confidence that since they can see and since we can see it, they're pretty happy that we are on top of all the information. Very easy to actually access it because it's cloud-based. So you don't need any specific tool or an app. You can use it directly from your browser. There's also an app, but then you can access all this information directly on a browser. Very easy to communicate. That's the most important thing, because you can get all the data, you can get the dashboards, you can get all the graphs that you need, and then present it, which you can see on the screen. So it's got all the statuses, it's got the ages, it's got the time ready, and if there's any delays, that also pops up. So we built that so that we can see all the information in one place. Again, from an internal reporting perspective, downloading of data was very, very easy. It's just one click of a button. That's it. So I think that makes a huge difference for us. Releasing whole points, again, remotely using mobile device. I think that's a big winner for us, because we always do a lot of work on the field, and we have clients actually inspecting, or the client representative inspecting our work. And it's easy for them to actually sign off when they are in the field, when they're actually looking at the activity. So electronic signature, that actually helps. You just need to open up your mobile device, whether it's even a phone or an iPad, and they can actually scribble their signature, which is pretty good for them and for us. Obviously, a single source of truth, because everything is in one place. So pretty much, I would say everyone's pretty happy with what we've done so far, and I think they can. It's more about providing them the confidence that everything is available online, and what you're seeing is real-time data. And that makes a huge impact in terms of how they actually look at information. Now, changes or improvements. Now, from a change perspective, it is a considerable change for engineers. So basically about allocating the work lots, and again, bulk loading all the information that actually helped them to resolve the issue when we had, as I said before, when we had lots attributes in the old system and the new system. So that basically helped us to actually change or resolve the issue. Now, mandatory fields that we introduced, and that actually helps us to drive behavior during creating lots, because we need to make sure that we have all the right information in the beginning. They actually input all the information, so whether it be a start date, whether a planned completion date, or even, for example, from a lot numbering perspective. So we had a lot of those mandatory fields introduced, which people started putting in, which actually gives us all that information, will help us to get the dashboards working well. Again, FH spreadsheet. So that was basically read only for engineers. What we did was, we didn't want people to go back into those Excel sheets which they were using, because most engineers are happy using Excel sheets. So what we did was, we locked it down and made sure that they can only see the information if at all they wanted to see it. So that is more of for an information only perspective, and if they want to go and look back at some old data. So made sure that everybody actually looks at the lot register that sits in CONQA. So that's again driving another behavior to make sure that we all are looking at the single source of truth, which is CONQA. We, as I said before, about a date field for checklist. So when we created drop downs and when we created all the buttons and all that, we made sure, again, the date field is actually a calendar widget. So that actually helps us for somebody to actually pick the date pretty easily. They didn't have to actually punch in the date themselves. Automatic lot numbering, again, pretty straightforward. People didn't have to actually do anything. The lot numbering was automatic. So there's no question of us duplicating lots when they're actually creating the lots. And I think that's pretty important for us, because previously we did have some issues where we had, when people were using Excel and that sort of information, there was always an issue with lot numbering being a bit going out of the serial numbering that they used to actually follow. Email notifications to lot owners and admins, and then basically whenever the status changes, we had that happening, which is again good information. List of whole points in lots and the status of each is something that we are looking at in the future. Probably in a couple of weeks from now, we are able to generate all the list of whole points, and then that gives us a better understanding of performance Navigation of lots, again, there are minor things that we're trying to improve, more in terms of a scroll bar introduction, which makes it more easier. So we're just moving it from the bottom to the top. So that's a sort of change that we are actually looking at in the future, but they're pretty minor ones. I think just going into the summary of what we actually did over a period of time. So one of the most important things was when we started this project. When I say project, the CONQA project, is that we had very clear objectives and goals. And I think that's pretty important for any project. If you're clear about what we want and what we want to achieve, I think half the battle is won. The next bit was about communicating all these requirements. So we had several meetings, and we actually clearly communicated what we needed. Of course, we had a big list, and then CONQA came back to us and clearly communicated what is possible now and what can be possible later. So we had a very realistic schedule of where we are going to reach in terms of our objectives and goals. We're pretty clear. We knew what we're going to get now and what we're going to get later. So we prioritized things that we said we need now, and we went ahead with that with that program. Obviously, when we have a new system being implemented, we always need to test it many times. So we did those tests several times to make sure that we get it right and there's no issues when we start implementing them or when the system goes live. Seeking feedback, extremely important. So when we say feedback can be even before we actually implement the system. So we can actually tell people that, yes, this is what we're going to do. What do you think about it? And they could actually come up with something which what we wouldn't have thought about, more from a user perspective. So we did that also. And I think that also helped us to fine tune our objectives and goals. And when we talk to stakeholders, example, MRPV, which is a client, they actually told us what they would like from their perspective. And we actually made sure those things are introduced into the new system. So I think all of that together is the one that actually helped us achieve whatever we wanted. So I think it's a pretty good outcome. And I'm really looking forward to more improvements being put in place. So that's pretty much from my end. Happy to take questions, or Dan, if you want to. Can't hear you, you're on mute, Dan.
Thank you, Ajith. There'll be a few questions, I think, coming through, and I think Elise has been collecting some throughout the presentation. But well done, Ajith. Thank you very much for walking us through that. I've got a first question here, which is kind of more based on, I guess, getting buy-in. We've found that, or there's been studies that have been done that highlight about 70% of software implementations fail. Most of them don't get over the line. And this implementation was done mid-project, which makes it even harder. Like, I'm sure anyone on the call who's tried to introduce something new to any of their projects partway through will run into a lot of challenges. So did you get any challenges getting buy-in to this type of project, I should say, and how did you overcome them?
Good question. Good question, Dan. I think, look, any new system will always have challenges, and buy-in, when you say, I think it's important, as I touched upon from a stakeholder perspective, it's important that we consider what the requirements are. The common challenge, I think, generally in implementing a new functionality is always ensuring that people who are actually going to use them, they are going to use the process without any difficulty. So how did we overcome this? So what we did was we actually spoke to each individual before we actually went into the getting the new system rollout. And I think that actually helps us to make those individuals, they'll feel a sense of ownership of the change. And that's the most important aspect. So involving them early on in the development phase and considering their input, I think that really creates a sense of a shared responsibility. And I think that's important. And this actually will lead to a very smooth implementation and greater acceptance at a later date, because they actually can understand that this is what we asked for and this is what we're getting.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it sounds like you had quite like a consultative approach.
Yes.
And also, I guess, took a leadership stance on it as well in terms of empowering the team to get their buy-in.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. One of the other questions here that's come through is on the use of real-time data. So you mentioned that was a big transformation and a big aspect of, a big part of the benefit that you were able to derive.
Yeah.
I was wondering, are you able to share any examples of kind of how that actually had an impact in a practical sense on the project?
I think it's a good question. Again, I'm glad you asked this question, because I think it's very important. Real-time data is the most important aspect of any system, because when you talk about data management, we need to be sure that we have the right information at all times. This actually helps us with enhanced decision making. So the thing is that you can actually pinpoint issues and resolve them before actually the issue gets bigger. And that's very important. More from a compliance perspective, we are able to monitor that on a regular basis, and we know that what we are monitoring is the right information. We are able to evaluate the consistency in implementing the test plans, the inspection test plans, which is basically what we have in CONQA, and checklists, more from a conformance perspective. All of this will actually help us to make the best decision for the project. And I think from an example perspective, when you say how this actually now, I think what we said before was about the time that we normally used to take to get the information and to make sure that it's right before we actually provide it to our client. So what we used to do was we used to run sort of not a dashboard. We had a notice board on this in our office, where we used to put all the graphs in there to show where we are progressing with our lot management. Now, we share an office with the client. So what actually we were doing is we had to compile all this, collate all this data, and then build graphs and then put it on the notice board. Now, all this became seamless, very easy for us to do, because we had real-time data at all times. And what we had to do is just go into the system, take a printout, and just paste it there. As simple as that. So I think real-time data definitely helps. And most importantly, it is about having that confidence. The customer have the confidence that what they are seeing is what is actually happening on the field.
Nice. I've got one more that Elise has collected during the session. This is an interesting one. It's going to be about time saving. Certainly in our travels, we've found that site and project engineers, they're pretty time poor. Yep. And don't always love doing the sort of the ITP or the lot management aspects of their job. Yep. So I know you touched on it earlier. There was, in terms of consolidating the lot register, there was some time saving. But did that also translate for time saving for your engineers as well? So it wasn't just your internal systems person. And do you know how much time it was saving?
Yep, that's a great question, Dan. Time is, I think, the most important thing that we can actually measure from a CONQA perspective. As I said before, the most important thing is that when somebody works on a new tool or a new system, it's got to be very intuitive. It's got to be very simple to use. So again, you're saving time there when somebody actually goes and is able to do his work without being too much of thought into what the system is actually offering. Now, going back to the Excel register that we were managing before, so we had Martin, our document manager. So he used to actually compile all the information, getting all the data from different places. So I would say maybe he would spend about 3 hours per week chasing all the information from different engineers and then getting in and then updating the records. And it was the same for the engineers too. They would be spending easily about 3 hours per week, because when people are asking questions to them, sometimes client asks direct questions to the engineer. They need to go and get information. So they have to go and make sure that the Excel sheet is updated and get all that information, input what you've done already on CONQA, make it, put it into the Excel register and get that information. So I would say that's about almost 4 to 6 hours of work per week. That's a lot of time, and that can be. I always say that if you have a good system, the most important aspect for an engineer is he can spend time on site and use that for supervising activities. It's more productive, and it actually saves a lot of money so that you don't have rework.
Yeah, I think that is definitely been kind of one of the main focuses since we started the business, is to try and make the lives a bit easier for the site engineers, and the benefits tend to roll uphill. In that kind of case. We've got some quite specific kind of product related questions. I think we're out of time today in terms of asking the dialogue, but continuing the dialogue. But I think it was Johan, and then we've got Araceli. Hopefully I've said that correctly, Gomez. But we'll follow up with you guys directly on these to get answers to you. Ajith, I want to thank you on behalf of everyone today for the effort you put in first and foremost on the Craigieburn road upgrade project, what you and your team did, and how you collaborated with us to help develop and implement something mid-project was awesome. It was a real pleasure and privilege for us to be a part of. And on behalf of everyone on the call today and at CONQA, really thank you for your time in preparing for this and sharing the story. Hopefully those who've joined have got a few insights into how to kind of manage a project like this, particularly on something at this scale. So yeah, thank you again. Well done. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks everyone for attending this session. Thanks, Elise.
Thanks, guys.